يجتبيك ربك ويعلمك من تأويل الأحاديث وكذلك يجتبيك ربك ويعلمك من تأويل الأحاديث ويتم نعمته عليك وعلى آل يعقوب كما أتمها على أبويك من قبل كما أتمها على أبويك من قبل إبراهيم وإسحاق إن ربك عليم حكيم صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اور رول شاہ کربلا کو زندگی کا بھروسہ نہیں ہے. اور رول شاہ کربلا کو جو بھی گرتا ہے اس غم میں آنسو کوئی بیکار جاتا نہیں ہے. اور رول شاہ کربلا کو جب جلے ہوں گے خیمے حرم کے جب چنی ہوں گی سر سے ردائیں جب جلے ہوں گے خیمے حرم کے جب چنی ہوگی سر سے ردائیں کیا بنی ہوگی سیدانیوں پر کیا بنی ہوگی سیدانیوں پر وہ سما دل سے جاتا نہیں ہے. اور رول شاہ کربلا کو بہر تعظیم اٹھو داری کرو میرے دل بر، بہر تعظیم اٹھو اے اکبر، پردہ داری کرو میرے دل بر، آ رہی ہے سواری پھوپھی کی، آ رہی ہے سواری پھوپھی کی، جس کا کوئی سہارا نہیں ہے، آؤ رو لیں شاہ کربلا کو، کربلا میں جو جائے گی زینب، کیا بتائے گی بھائی کو زینب، کربلا میں جو جائے گی زینب، کیا بتائے گی بھائی کو زینب، چٹکے زندہ سے جو آ رہے ہیں، چٹکے زندہ سے جو آ رہے ہیں، ان میں پیاری سکینہ نہیں ہے، آؤ رو لیں شاہ کربلا کو، جب مدینے میں جائے گی زینب، کیا بتائے گی صغرا کو زینب، جب مدینے میں جائے گی زینب، کیا بتائے گی صغرا کو زینب، وہ نشان رسن بازوؤں پر، وہ نشان رسن بازوؤں پر، نیل اب تک چھٹا ہی نہیں ہے، آؤ رو لیں شاہ کربلا۔
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد۔
ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات۔
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد۔
چند اشعار آپ کی سماعتوں کی نظر۔ خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے، خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے، قدرت نے ہمیں شہ کا عزادار بنا کے، خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے، قدرت نے ہمیں شہ کا عزادار بنا کے، خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے کہ اللہ نے جنت کو شرف بخشا ہے اپنی، اللہ نے جنت کو شرف بخشا ہے اپنی، زہرا تیری اولاد کو سردار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے کہ عباس کے پرچم کی ہوا آتی ہے جب بھی، عباس کے پرچم کی ہوا آتی ہے جب بھی، نسلوں کو گزرتی ہے وفادار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے کہ ہے خاک شفا شہ کی خریدی ہوئی مٹی، ہے خاک شفا شہ کی خریدی ہوئی مٹی، رکھتی ہے غریبوں کو زمیندار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے کہ آخری شعر پیش ہے آپ کی سماعتوں کی نظر کہ ہر سمت ہے دنیا میں یزیدوں کی قطاریں، ہر سمت ہے دنیا میں یزیدوں کی قطاریں، بچوں کو اگر پالو تو مختار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے، قدرت نے ہمیں شہ کا عزادار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے کہ ہر سمت ہے دنیا میں یزیدوں کی قطاریں، ہر سمت ہے دنیا میں یزیدوں کی قطاریں، بچوں کو اگر پالو تو مختار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے کہ اللہ نے جنت کو شرف بخشا ہے اپنی، اللہ نے جنت کو شرف بخشا ہے اپنی، زہرا تیری اولاد کو سردار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے اور ایک اور شعر جو میں نے چھوڑ دیا تھا وہ پڑھ لیتا ہوں پھر سے کہ میدان سے دو بار پلٹ آئے ہیں اکبر، میدان سے دو بار پلٹ آئے ہیں اکبر، تصویر قیامت تیری دو بار بنا کے خود ناز سے دیکھا ہے کئی بار بنا کے بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. ایک اور دو اشعار آپ کی ساتھوں کی نظر. دامن میں ان آنکھوں کے فقط چند ہے آنسو. دامن میں ان آنکھوں کے فقط چند ہے آنسو. لیکن غم شبیر کے پابند ہے آنسو. دامن میں آنکھوں کے فقط چند ہے آنسو. گھر سب کو پیارا ہے مگر شاہ کی خاطر. گھر سب کو پیارا ہے مگر شاہ کی خاطر. خود گھر سے نکلنے کو رضامند ہے آنسو. دامن میں آنکھوں کے فقط چند ہے آنسو. لے جاتی ہے یوں ان کو سنبھالے ہوئے زہرا. لے جاتی ہے یوں ان کو سنبھالے ہوئے زہرا. اس ماں کے لیے جیسے کہ فرزند ہو آنسو. دامن میں آنکھوں کے فقط چند ہے آنسو. آخری شعر پیش ہے آپ کی سماعتوں کی نظر. اللہم صلی علی کہ ان کو صف ماتم میں رہا کرنا ہے اکبر. ان کو صف ماتم میں رہا کرنا ہے اکبر. مدت سے جو آنکھوں میں نظر بند ہے آنسو. دامن میں ان آنکھوں کے فقط چند ہے آنسو. بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.
یہ جو صاحب ہیں ان کا نام ہے موسیٰ، اور یہ اپنے زعیم رضا صاحب کے فرزند ہیں. یہ ان کے بیٹے ہیں مولانا زعیم رضا صاحب کے. یہیں بoston میں رہتے ہیں. جی بoston میں رہتے ہیں. ابھی تک یہ چھپے ہوئے تھے، بہرحال آج یہ باہر آ گئے تو ہم لوگوں نے ان کو پکڑ لیا. انشاءاللہ گوئنگ فارورڈ ہی ول بی ہیئر. ہاں اب تو انہیں آنا ہوگا، ان کے اوپر فرض ہو گیا. زعیم صاحب سے ایسے ہی سینٹر کا بڑا پرانا تعلق ہے. جی بہرحال اب میں فہیم بھائی سے گزارش کروں گا کہ بارگاہ مولا میں نذران عقیدت پیش کریں. جناب نئی فہیم صاحب.
نہیں جس سال وہ تھے یہ اس وقت آئے بھی تھے ان کے ساتھ. جی پڑھا نہیں. ماشاء اللہ جزاک اللہ. بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. کیسے ملتا ہے خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے. کیسے ملتا
خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، جا کے خود کرب و بلا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، کیسے ملتا ہے خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، روز کشکول اٹھائے چلا آتا ہوں حسین، روز کشکول اٹھائے چلا آتا ہوں حسین، تیرا دروازہ کھلا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، کیسے ملتا ہے خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، ھذا من فضل حسین ابن علی و زہرا، ھذا من فضل حسین ابن علی و زہرا، حر کے ماتھے پہ لکھا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، کیسے ملتا اور تیرے صدقے میں اے عباس دلاور کے علم، تیرے صدقے میں عباس دلاور کے علم، کیسے چلتی ہے ہوا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، کیسے ملتا ہے خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، اور مشکلیں جانے اور اب جانے علمدار حسین، مشکلیں جانے اور اب جانے علمدار حسین، جانی بے کر بو بلا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، اور سامنے کرتا ہے بیٹا میرا شہ کا ماتم، سامنے کرتا ہے بیٹا میرا شہ کا ماتم، کیا ہے انجام میرا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے اور وہب کہتا تھا میں کلمہ نہ پڑھوں کیوں مولا، وہب کہتا تھا میں کلمہ نہ پڑھوں کیوں مولا، تیری آنکھوں میں خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، اور تربت فاطمہ زہرا پہ کیا ہے ماتم، تربت فاطمہ زہرا پہ کیا ہے ماتم، خواب تو قد سے بڑا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، اور علی اکبر میری امداد کو آئے اکبر، علی اکبر میری امداد کو آئے اکبر، کس کو کہتے ہیں عطا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، اور تیرے خیمے کا دیا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، تیرے خیمے کا دیا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، کتنی بے بس ہے ہوا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، کیسے ملتا اور وہب کہتا تھا میں کلمہ نہ پڑھوں کیوں مولا، وہب کہتا تھا میں کلمہ نہ پڑھوں کیوں تیرا، تیری آنکھوں میں خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے، کیسے ملتا ہے خدا دیکھ لیا ہے میں نے،
سلامتی کے لیے بلند تر صلوات،
علی محمد۔ جزاک اللہ فہیم بھائی، میں گزارش کروں گا جناب شبر سے نہیں میں پڑھیں پڑھنے آپ تھوڑا سا پڑھ لیں، ایک دو ابھی آج ٹائم ہے، آج کی رات میں تھوڑا ٹائم ہے تو پڑھ لیں، آج تو محمود بھائی بھی آئے ہیں، تو اب محمود بھائی آج تو محمود بھائی ہم لوگ کے بیچ میں موجود ہیں، تو اب اس کا فائدہ اٹھائیں اور اچھی سی داد ان سے لیں۔
بڑی نوازشی داد ہمیشہ اچھی ملتی ہے، ان سے ملتی ہے، اور مجھے جو عزت اس در سے ملی ہے اس کا جواب نہیں ہے جی۔ ہاں درود پڑھ دیجیے ایک مرتبہ۔ السلام علیکم۔ پہلے تو ایک شعر سنا دوں آپ کو. فہیم بھائی نے ذکر کیا ھذا من فضل ربی کہ ہم نے جب غور سے دیکھا تو پرے فطرس پر، ہم نے جب غور سے دیکھا تو پرے فطرس پر ھذا من فضل حسین ابن علی لکھا تھا. ہم نے جب غور سے دیکھا تو پرے فطرس پر ھذا من فضل حسین ابن علی لکھا تھا. درود پڑھ دیجیے ایک مرتبہ. چیزیں بہت ساری پڑھنے والی ہیں، اور اب نذیر اکبر آبادی کی ایک نظم کسی زمانے میں پڑھی تھی، آج سے 50-55 سال پہلے، آدمی نامہ، کہ مسجد بھی آدمی نے بنائی ہے یہاں میاں، بنتے ہیں آدمی ہی امام اور خطبہ خاں، پڑھتے ہیں آدمی ہی نماز اور قرآن یہاں، اور آدمی ہی ان کی چراتے ہیں جوتیاں، وہ جو ان کو تاڑتا ہے سو ہے وہ بھی آدمی. جوش ملی آبادی نے آدمی نامہ لکھا. 2 اشعار آپ کو سنا دوں کہ تو خزف کو قمر و لال و گوہر دیتا ہے، تو خزف کو قمر و لال و گوہر دیتا ہے، اور شب لب تشنا کو گل بانگ سحر دیتا ہے. شب تشنا لب کو گل بانگ سحر دیتا ہے. موج تخیل کو، جعفری صاحب، موج تخیل کو لفظوں میں قطر دیتا ہے. موج تخیل کو لفظوں میں قطر دیتا ہے، کینچی سے قطرنا. موج تخیل کو لفظوں میں قطر دیتا ہے، اور روح کاغذ کے مسامات میں بھر دیتا ہے. روح کاغذ کے مسامات میں بھر دیتا ہے. خاموشی کو ہمتن ساز بنا دیتا ہے، خاموشی کو ہمتن ساز بنا دیتا ہے، اور تو خیالات کو آواز بنا دیتا ہے. تو خیالات کو آواز بنا دیتا ہے، اور تو ایک سطر میں 100 شہر بسا دیتا ہے. تو ایک سطر میں 100 شہر بسا دیتا ہے، اور تاکہ الفاظ میں قندیل جلا دیتا ہے. گنگناتا ہے، شعر ملاحظہ فرمائیے حضور، گنگناتا ہے تو کاغذ کو بجا دیتا ہے. گنگناتا ہے تو کاغذ کو بجا دیتا ہے، اور فکر سی چیز کو آنکھوں سے دکھا دیتا ہے. فکر سی چیز کو آنکھوں سے دکھا دیتا ہے. جب جو تجھے معرض رفتار میں لے آتے ہیں، جب تجھے معرض رفتار میں لے آتے ہیں، کتنے بت ہیں کہ ترشتے ہی چلے جاتے ہیں. کتنے بت ہیں کہ ترشتے ہی چلے جاتے ہیں. حضور آخری بند ہے، آدمی حافظ و خیام و انیس و عرفی. آدمی حافظ و خیام و انیس و عرفی، غالب و مومن و فردوسی و میر و سعدی. آدمی حافظ و خیام و انیس و عرفی، غالب و مومن و فردوسی و میر و سعدی. خسرو و رومیوں عطار و جنید و شبلی. خسرو و رومیوں عطار و جنید و شبلی، یونس و یوسف و یعقوب و سلیمان و علی. یہ سارے آدمیوں کی یونس و یوسف و یعقوب و سلیمان و علی. خطبہ بیت حضور، خطبہ حضرت خلاق کا ممبر انسان. خطبہ حضرت خلاق کا ممبر انسان، انتہا یہ ہے محمد سا پیمبر انسان. انتہا یہ ہے محمد سا پیمبر انسان. یا علی جی، بسم اللہ. شکریہ،
بہت بہت شکریہ. ایک قطعہ پیش ہے کہ باقی ہے نظام دوسرا ہے کہ نہیں ہے، باقی ہے نظام دوسرا ہے کہ نہیں ہے، جب ہے تو کوئی وجہ بقا ہے کہ نہیں ہے. کسی وجہ سے سسٹم مینٹین ہے کہ باقی ہے نظام دوسرا ہے کہ نہیں ہے، جب ہے تو کوئی وجہ بقا ہے کہ نہیں ہے. اور رخ کر کے سوئے قبر علی کہتا ہے سورج، رخ کر کے سوئے قبر علی کہتا ہے سورج، مغرب کی طرف جاؤں رضا ہے کہ نہیں ہے، مغرب کی طرف جاؤں رضا ہے کہ نہیں. اب میں گزارش کروں گا جناب شبر سید صاحب سے.
نعرہ حیدری، آواز بلند صلوات. محمد وآل محمد.
صلوات پڑھیے. مولانا بارے دیگر صلوات. نہ بھول کر بھی کبھی تم کسی کی بات کرو، نہ بھول کر بھی کبھی تم کسی کی بات کرو. علی کا ذکر کرو، بس علی کی بات کرو. نہ بھول کر بھی کسی کا نفس، کسی کا وسیع، کسی کا خدا، یہ سب صفات ہوں جس میں اسی کی بات کرو. علی کا ذکر کرو، بس علی کی بات کرو. نہ بھول کر بھی یہ ذکر نبی ہے، یہی ہے ذکر خدا. علی کے ہوتے ہوئے کیوں کسی کی بات کرو. علی کا ذکر کرو، بس علی کی بات کرو. نہ بھول کر بھی لحد میں میری اندھیرا ہو عین ممکن ہے، جہاں علی ہوں وہاں روشنی کی بات کرو. ازل سے ساقیے کوثر سے ہوں میں وابستہ، نہ میرے آگے کسی تشنگی کی بات کرو. ہے وقت نازاں کہ بالی پہ آئے ہیں مولا، کہاں کی موت بس اب زندگی کی بات کرو. علی کا ذکر کرو، بس علی کی بات کرو. نہ بھول کر بھی سمجھ میں آنا سکے گا کبھی علی کا مقام، نہ اس طرح کبھی دیوانگی کی بات کرو. فرشتوں کیسا سوال و جواب تربت میں اب آ گئے ہو تو بیٹھو علی کی بات کرو. فرشتوں کیسا سوال و جواب تربت میں. اب آ گئے ہو تو بیٹھو علی کی بات کرو. بوقت نازا کہوں گا میں مومنوں سے سعید نکل رہا ہے میرا دم علی کی بات کرو. علی کا ذکر کرو بس علی کی بات کرو. نہ بھول کر بھی صلوات بار دیگر صلوات. فاتحہ. اے مومنو یثرب میں عجب نوحہ گری ہے. اے مومنو یثرب میں عجب نوحہ گری ہے. زہرا کے لیے داغ غم بے پدری ہے. لب خشک ہے منہ زرد ہے آنکھوں میں تری ہے. پیغمبر کونین چراغ سحری ہوتے ہیں جدا خیر البشر خیر النساء سے. محبوب خدا چھٹتے ہیں شیر خدا سے. ہلکے سکے اسرار اجل کھل گئے دل پر. مسجد میں گئے ذوف کے عالم میں پیغمبر. عباس و علی تھامے ہوئے دست متا اور جا کے پڑھا خطبہ آخر سر منبر. پھر بولے کہ پہنچا ہو اگر رنج کسی کو اے مومنو تم عفو کرو اپنے نبی کو. گر بعد میرے پہنچے گا زہرا کو کچھ آزا مرکد سے میری پشت نہیں لگنے کی زینہا. یہ چار بزرگ آل پیامبر ہیں خبر. زہرا و حسین و حسن و حیدر کر واجب میرے اصحاب پہ ان سب کی ولا ہے. یارو یہی تبلیغ رسالت کا صلہ ہے. ایک آہ کی رونے لگے اور غش ہوئے مولا دروازے سے ناگاہ صدا یہ ہوئی پیدا دو اذن حضور حرم سید والا جا کر کہا زہران کے بے ہوش ہیں بابا پھر آئی ندا پھر وہی فرما گئی زہرا پھر تیسری آواز میں تھرا گئی زہرا فرصت جو ہوئی غش سے تو حضرت نے بھی پوچھا زہرا نے کہا ایک عرب آیا ہے وہ مانگتا ہے اذن حضور ہے میرے بابا کتنا ہی کیا عذر نہیں اس کو پذیرا حضرت نے کہا یہ ملک موت ہے زہرا ہنگام میری زیست کعب فوت ہے زہرا پھر دست ید اللہ میں زہرا کا دیا فرمایا سلوک اس سے جو ہوگا ہے میرے زہرا سے کہا خدمت ہے در ہے عبادت بے حکم ید نہ کرنا تو کوئی بات محتاج میرے بھائی کو سرتاج سمجھنا حیدر کی کنیزی کو تمہیں راج سمجھ حیدر کی کنیزی کو تمہیں راج سمجھ فرمایا فریسے سے کہ اے قبض کرب جان راہی ہوئے مولا طرف روضہ رضوان پہلے شاہ مردان سر اپنا کیا اور پھر پھاڑے نواسوں نے بھی ننے سے گرے غش میں کہیں زینب کہیں کلثوم پڑی تھی خاتون قیامت پہ قیامت کی گھڑی تھی خاتون قیامت پہ قیامت کی گھڑی تھی اے مومنو یثرب میں صلوات
جزاک اللہ شبر بھائی. اس سے پہلے کہ میں مولانا صاحب کو دعوت دوں couple of quick announcement. انشاءاللہ ٹمارو ہم لوگوں کے یہاں پہ کیریئر ڈے ہو رہا ہے at 10:45 AM یہاں پہ پروگرام اسٹارٹ ہوگا. اس میں کافی پینلسٹ آئیں گے 16-17 پینلسٹ ہیں اور کافی اسٹوڈنٹس نے بھی انرول کیا ہے. This program is geared towards the teenagers who are about to go to colleges. So these professional will guide them and provide some detail about how the career they can choose the career and work on that. So اس میں جو بھی لوگ پارٹیسپیٹ کر رہے ہیں وہ تو اچھا ہے, لیکن अगर आप किसी को जानते हैं, whoever wants to participate, they are more than welcome to come here at 10:45 AM. और कल दिन में रुहेल साहब के घर पे at 2 PM there will be a Majlis Aza and Qibla will be the speaker for that Majlis. So आप हज़रात से गुजारिश है कि उसमें भी शिरकत करें. And tomorrow night inshallah we will have Majlis here like tonight, और that Majlis will have ताबूत, और ताबूत उसमें निकाला जाएगा. तो आप हज़रात से गुजारिश है कि उसमें भी शिरकत करें. With this I would like to invite Moulana Sulayman Abidi साहब to take the member. आप हज़रात उनका एक बुलंद सलवात से इस्तकबाल करें. सल्ले अला मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद. अला मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद.
Suratul Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين، شفيع المذنبين وحبيب قلوب الصادقين، سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا والذين هاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله أولئك يرجون رحمة الله والله غفور رحيم. صلاة على محمد وآل محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we briefly discussed yesterday, there is a very important message in this verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 218, in which Allah tells us that there is a series of attributes that are the basis for living a life of true hope. If we have these three qualities, then it is possible for us to live a life of hope. Now, we find in our society, in spite of all of the progress and advancements that our civilization and our society has attained in terms of technology, in terms of intellectual developments, in terms of the sophistication of our societal, our political, our economic, and our other institutions and relationships, one of the things that we have not been able to do as well as societies and civilizations throughout history is to give hope to humanity. And much of the instability and many of the worrying societal and political developments that we are seeing, whether in this society or in other countries and societies around the world, they are a reflection of the fact that many people have lost hope in their future. They have lost hope in the institutions of their society. And those people who have hope often have a false hope. And those two are actually the same thing. They are two sides of the same coin. If I put hope in politics, then I might be very enthusiastic and very excited, and I might get caught up in the passion of a political campaign. But even as I am filled with enthusiasm and passion and hope, there are the seeds of my disappointment within that happiness. Because no matter what the party is, no matter what the platform is, no matter who the candidate is, they are not going to be able to accomplish what I think and hope, and maybe even, if the small likelihood of the party and the platform and the candidate being sincere are true, what they hope to accomplish. So whether it be a human relationship or a material possession or an institution or a worldly goal, even when we are filled with enthusiasm and hope, that is not separate from the hopelessness and from the despondency that exists within society. Sometimes the bubble bursts quickly, and sometimes the bubble bursts after years or decades. In some cases, there are people who live an entire lifetime of negligence, and the numbness only wears off when they have crossed this life into the hereafter. Alhaakumut takathur. In particular, material wealth. If you lose it all, then you might appreciate that it doesn't stay. But even many people who lose it all still chase wealth continuously. And they only lose that mirage. The numbness only wears off hatta zurtumul maqabir. When they come into the grave and they realize that whether they were wealthy and remained wealthy, or whether they had it and lost it, it wasn't going to stay forever anyway. And even the most privileged will bid farewell to their privileges and their luxuries and their possessions when they leave this world. So sometimes we don't realize it early. Other times we get disenchanted and disappointed quickly. But hopelessness in material things is actually sometimes better than having a false hope in something material. Because when I am on the drugs of false hope, then it is like your body is numb to pain. None of us enjoys pain. But would you rather be numb and not find out that you have an injury or an infection until it becomes gangrenous and it needs to be amputated? Or would you rather feel the pain and know that you need to do something about it? We don't like the pain, but the pain is a blessing. And if there were some ointment that you could take or some medicine that you could take to make yourself numb to any kind of pain, then you wouldn't be doing yourself a favor, because you might step on a nail and you might not realize it in time to be able to save your limb and to protect yourself. So sometimes when a person is despondent, we think that they are worse off than when a person is chasing a dream. But the reality is that if the person is chasing a mirage, then they are one step further from realizing what they need to do to truly live a life of hope. Now, that doesn't mean that we want to make people despondent, or we celebrate the state of hopelessness that we find within our society. Ideally, Islam wants us to take that false hope that we have because of our ignorance, because of our culture, because of our upbringing, and to translate it to something that is meaningful. Not to hit rock bottom and be absolutely hopeless and despondent, and then to try to pick up the pieces once again. I gave 2 examples yesterday, and we can think of other examples of the same principle. One example is that every human being loves what is beautiful. Some of us are very much in tune to visual beauty, and we have a very developed aesthetic sense. And so even if we are staying in an apartment temporarily, we might decorate it and adorn it so that it is beautiful and it is pleasant to our eyes. Others of us, we have a sense of grooming and how we want to present ourselves. And so we give thought to our wardrobe and to how we dress and how we present ourselves in public, even in private. Sometimes we want to make sure that even if I am cooking a meal that is going to be consumed the same day. Nowadays, people, they make their meals eternal by taking 1 million pictures and sending it to half the world. But even before that, there were people who would decorate and make a very beautiful meal, even if it wasn't going to be photographed and it wasn't going to be put on Instagram, and it was just going to be consumed by the family. That is the fitrah of a human being, to seek beauty. And that is better than somebody who says, what's the point? I'm just going to eat it anyway, let me throw together a sloppy meal. I'm only going to live in this house for a few days. Let me just keep it as a pigsty. It's not like I'm going to be here forever. To be able to appreciate beauty and create beauty is better. The famous incident of the hadith that I mentioned yesterday from Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa Inna Allah jameel yuhibbul jamal is a general principle that Allah is beautiful, and therefore Allah loves beauty. Create beauty and seek beauty in every area of your life and do things well. It's narrated that even when a grave is being dug, this is one of those instructive examples from the life of our Prophet that we should remind ourselves of. A grave is something, first of all, that isn't celebrated. It is a time of grief and a time of tragedy. And second of all, it is something that is meant to be filled right away. Generally, a grave is dug not in advance, but when it is needed, and then just hours after the grave is dug and the body is placed within it, it is entirely filled and invisible. But the Prophet said that if you dig a grave, then dig it well. Dig it with perfection and with beauty, even if you are going to fill it. Not because somebody will see it, not because it's going to make a difference to the dead body, but because it is what kind of person you should be as a believer, to always want to do whatever you do well and to do it with beauty. So this is a desire of the human soul that Islam has affirmed. But then Islam wants us to direct our desire for beauty not to the perfection of our physical features. So that if my cheekbones aren't high enough or my features aren't the way that I want them, I am insecure about it. And I look for cosmetic or surgical or other means to beautify my physical features. The desire for beauty is given to us by God and is one of the means by which we can worship God and we can come close to God. But if I focus on physical beauty, then it's like building a house of cards on a foundation of clouds. It's going to collapse because the physical body was never meant to be the greatest repository of the beauty that God has created within our existence. It's just the vehicle. The building you build on that body is what you want to beautify. And that building is your soul. And if your soul is beautified, then it doesn't matter if your physical features are not as perfect or as you may have wished them to be. So one example is beauty. The other example is acquisitiveness. We all have a desire to have more. But then that desire for more can be material or it can be spiritual. The desire to have more is something that is placed in us by God. But it's placed in us by God not so that we can create a material empire of gold and jewels and properties and assets, but so that we have the motivation and the ambition to ascend in terms of piety and purity and move towards the perfection of the human soul. Now, there are two ways, just using these examples, that you can go about that. One is that you can be despondent about material acquisition, and then you can turn your attention towards God and spiritual perfection. The other way is that if you have ambition without ever becoming bankrupt, without ever hitting rock bottom, without ever becoming despondent, you align your goals so that they become progressively more spiritual. First, I take pride in how much I have. Then I take pride in how much I can give. And then gradually I perfect that and refine that. So I'm not even taking pride in how much I can give, but I am humbled by the fact that Allah has blessed me to be able to give so much. And then I try to purify the intention of my giving so that at the moment I do it and afterwards when I have done it, my desire, my intention is purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and following the example of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. and not for any credit and not for any personal goal. So the ideal situation is that you refine and you change that desire you have within your upbringing, within your personality, from a material goal towards God. But if a person is chasing a material goal and another person says that I don't have any hope that a new candidate or a new party or a new government is going to solve our problems, the person who says I don't have any hope in this political solution or technological solution or any material solution of this world is one step ahead, as long as that loss of hope is not where they stop, but rather then they affirmatively place their hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is the outcome that will never lead to disappointment. It will never be something that you will lose. And this is why the Quran says that those who are pious and are believers, la khawfun alayhim, they have nothing to fear about the future, because they are living their lives preparing for the future. وَلَا يَحْزَنُونَ. They have no regret about the past. That is the state of a believer because of the nature of their intention whenever they make any decision in their life. And I will give one example. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To understand this example, think of one decision you made in your life that you made the best decision you could and you regretted it. Maybe some of us, when the housing market was really hot, we're like, you know what? I should buy a house because it's just going to get more and more unaffordable in the future. And so we pooled our resources. Maybe we took the advice of people who have more experience, and we cut corners on some of our less important expenses. Maybe I didn't trade up my car, or I cut down on some of my other expenses, and I bought a house. And then 6 months after I made that purchase, I realized that I could have saved 6 figures if I had just waited a little bit. And so I might regret that decision. Or it might have been an investment I made. Everybody's talking about this stock. Everybody's talking about Bitcoin. It's only going to go up. And so I put my life savings in Bitcoin. And I think, I know a few weeks ago it had come down. I'm not current. But presumably, some people are probably disappointed. Some people may be happy with it. But I might regret that. Why did I listen to my friend who was talking up that stock or that cryptocurrency or that investment? And these types of decisions, we find people will often regret. Sometimes people regret a favor they did to a family member. That, I helped out my children and I thought that they would be there for me, but I regret that they didn't respond in kind. Or sometimes an elder sibling, especially in our traditional cultures, elder siblings often feel a great sense of responsibility to be a surrogate parent for their younger siblings. And so some of us may have experienced it. I have certainly heard it from many people that I gave my sincerity and my blood and my sweat and my tears to my siblings to help them flourish, and they have not repaid me in kind. That part is a frustration, and that's part of our human relationships. We don't always get the response. My point is to say that the next sentence, which people sometimes say, I wish I hadn't done it, or I regret it, is not something that a believer should ever say. Not because you don't learn, but because never make a decision because it is a good investment. If I buy the house or the stock or the investment because it is a smart investment, there is no way that I can't have a pang of regret if it doesn't turn out to be as profitable as I thought. If I help out a friend or a family member because I hope that they will repay me when I need their help, then there is no way to avoid a sense of regret if they don't return my call when I need them in the middle of the night, even if I was there for them time after time when they needed me at all hours of day and night. If I make that decision for the sake of Allah, based on the best information I have. So if reasonable people tell you that this is not a good investment, this is not a good decision to make, this is not a good person to marry, this is not a good person to enter into a business relationship with, this is not a wise course of action, then I should take into account the advice given in sincerity by my trusted believers and people who have more knowledge and experience than I do. But I never make the decision in the final analysis, whenever I'm going to sign on the dotted line. I don't say, because inshallah I will earn money on it. Even if it's an investment that you hope to earn money on. Never help somebody because you hope that they will even give you so much as a thank you. Even if they do owe you, and you do hope that they will give you a thank you. Make the decision that is financially wise. Make the decision that is prudent. But when it comes to signing on that dotted line, always make the intention that the reason in the end I'm making this decision is because I have evaluated all of my options and I have determined that this is the one that is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Meaning I have examined, do I owe Allah something other than what I am doing? Is buying this car or this house or making this investment taking the place of an obligation that I owe Allah, whether it be Hajj, or it be Khums, or it be assistance to my needy parents, or relatives, or fellow believers, or is this an investment and a decision that Allah has blessed and permitted me to make? Am I making it because I want to do it for myself, or because I believe that this is something that will be pleasing to Allah? Is the house in a neighborhood that I have examined, will it allow me to be a member of my community and to be a regular attendee at my center? Not so that I can benefit from it, but that I can contribute to it. Sometimes when you say to people, live near the masjid, they say, oh, you don't know my city. The masjid isn't that active. I don't get anything out of it. Well, if that is the case, then it's even more important for you to be near it. If it were a masjid that was very active and thriving, then your living near it is simply something that you will benefit from. But if it is not thriving, then you need to be near it so that you can contribute. Same thing with family. If you say that when you choose a house, make sure that you are close to family. Oh, my family is not that religious. My family has not been there for me. We're not that close. If you were very close, then it wouldn't be a problem if your family lives on the East Coast and you live on the West Coast. Because at least your closeness will ensure that you will keep in touch with them and they will keep in touch with you. And so you will have a relationship. But now that your family is not close, if you live halfway across the world, what motive do you have to do Silatul Rahim? And what motive do they have to do Silatul Rahim? So sometimes the logic is actually reversed. If the masjid is not thriving, I need to be close because my relationship with the masajid, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. They belong to God. And so I attend not to get, but to give. So I call upon Allah and establish that institution. My relationship with my family is not because I want something from them, but because I want to honor that obligation and that relationship that God has given me. And if we are not close, I'm not saying the only way to become close is that you must live nearby, but it becomes a higher priority to maintain that relationship. And one of the ways that you can maintain and honor that relationship is by being close and being present, so that you can show them a positive image of somebody who is religious. Maybe they will never become religious, but just by your presence, if they have a grudge or a bad experience, at least they will say that these religious people are not arrogant and high and mighty. My own son, my own daughter, my own relative is a very nice person, and they are the first person that I would call on in need, or the first person that I would trust if I needed something. So the antagonism at least is converted to neutrality or maybe a favorable view. And that is the first step for either them to be guided or for their future generations to be guided. And that guidance is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad. So the point is that when you sign on the dotted line, if your final decision is made on the basis of, is this going to be pleasing to Allah, then you might make a great profit or you might not. But that is a basis that can never allow for regret. Because what is there better than pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I'm not saying you make a dumb decision, because Allah is not pleased by us ignoring our intelligence and making a decision. That would be, for example, if I have maybe a child who is a college student and they have a difficult commute to get to college or to an internship, and they have to take the bus and then walk, and they're always rushing. And so I say, hey, I can help you, I can buy you a car. And that should facilitate their getting to class on time, getting to their internship on time. And then 2 weeks later, I call and I say, so has life become easy? And they say, oh, I don't use the car. That was just a gift, I want to honor it. If I take it out in the street, then it might get into an accident or it might get into a fender bender. You haven't honored your parents by ignoring their gift. And you don't honor Allah by ignoring your intellect, which is God's gift, far more important than any gift any human being can give me. If I make the smartest decision I can make based on my intellect and based on the information that I have access to, and I make it so that it is smart, I will always realize that I was never as smart as I could be. And so the potential for regret when I get better information is always there. But if I make the smartest decision I can make, not on the basis of it being smart, and instead on the basis of whether or not it is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I can never bring to Allah more than the best information and sincerity I have at that moment. And that is the only way that you can make a decision that you will never have a regret for. And this is why we find in ahadith from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam that a believer should never say, if only it were like this. On one level, that means don't be the kind of person who is always imagining and reliving and replaying scenes from your life, so that you don't live in the present and plan for the future, but rather you are reliving the past. On one level, ahadith are telling us don't do that. But on another level, they are telling us make your decisions in a way that you don't have to do it, because you are making your decisions in a way that doesn't cause or lead to regret. This is what brings tranquility. Make your decisions just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what brings hope. Because whenever you make a decision solely for the sake of Allah, then Allah will bless it. And when He blesses it, you see the bounty in that blessing and in the outcome. And I have seen many people who made a decision that made their life harder, but they would not turn back the clock and do things in any other way. They made a donation in the way of Allah, which means they have to work more hours. They had children who are a handful, but they are rewarded and blessed by Allah for having made their life more difficult by adding a responsibility on their shoulders. They did it for the sake of Allah. And so it's not that Allah gives them all ease and comfort and no stress and hardship. But with that hardship, inna ma'al usri yusra, comes comfort and ease and reassurance. And it is in that outcome that you see the hand of God and the blessings of God and the benefit of making your decisions solely for the sake of Allah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So once again, this is the nature of true hope. First of all, we remove ourselves from putting hope in something that belongs to this material world, because this material world is not created to remain forever. And then we affirmatively place our hope in that which comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In doing so, you don't remove yourself from this world. So when I say that the problems humanity faces are not political, and therefore don't put your hopes in politics, I am not saying remove yourself from knowledge and participation in the political life of your society. When I say the problems people face are not intellectual, and so don't place your hope in some new discovery or some new invention or some new intellectual breakthrough. I'm not saying avoid the intellectual developments and society that you live in. When we say that the problems humanity has are not technology in their origin and are not of a technological nature, then we are not saying don't be concerned with science, or don't be concerned with technology, or don't benefit from those opportunities that exist within our life. But rather what we are saying is view all of those avenues of our life and all of those resources through a divine lens. So you are not a slave to the newest intellectual fad, or the newest technological fad, or the newest political movement, but rather you can evaluate and you can judge with a profundity, a depth that comes from living a life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can view the material world through a spiritual lens, not just through a material lens. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now there is a paradox that sometimes we find within our religious communities, which is related to this point that I make. We mentioned how we live in a society that has a great deal of hopelessness. And often people who have the most, they have the emptiest lives. That is because, in one sense, they are a step ahead of those people who are chasing the mirage and living in the rat race. The difficulty and the frustration that they experience, it doesn't mean that they are worse off than somebody who is happy with their material toys and materialistic life. The solution to that is to put your hope in God and that which lasts. But there is another problem that we find within our societies. And this is the incidence of mental illness, and so many emotional and psychological problems within our Muslim community and within people of faith. Not because they don't believe in God, but because believing in God and living in a religious manner creates additional stress for many people. And so they are afraid of the judgment of their parents. They are afraid. I know people who say that I don't come to the masjid because I'm now in my 20s. And the only thing that the aunties are going to ask me or the uncles are going to ask me is, so are you married yet? And now, personally, I think that's a valid question. And if you are in your 20s, then it is something to think about. But we live in a society where people have a desire for personal space and an expectation of personal space. And what I think might be a valid question is not the point, but rather my need to respect the person and their expectations. That is the basis of how I interact with others. And if I can only see my own culture and back in the day and back home, this was normal, then that is a sign of my arrogance. So for Muslims, sometimes there is an added stress because they are living in a secular society, at work, at school, and with their friends and in public. And then they are living with the expectations of religion that come from family and from community and maybe also from within. And so I feel inadequate if my presence and my practice in religious terms is not up to the ideal and the standard, not just for the sake of my parents, but for the sake of myself. And this creates so much hardship for our Muslims. And we see that in our communities. So one paradox, which we talked about yesterday, was that people who don't have God, they often lose hope. That's one side of the coin. I'm grateful, and all of us should be grateful, that we have a source of hope that is not false and temporary, but rather true. But we shouldn't ignore the other side of the coin, which is that people who do believe in God also sometimes have a great deal of pressure on them and sometimes become despondent because they don't see light at the end of the tunnel. And so they become disenchanted and they become in some way distant from their family or from their community or from their religious practice. And so how can we understand and how can we deal with this problem within our own religious communities? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And I will just mention a few basic points and not make an attempt in space of a few minutes to give a comprehensive answer. But the first point is that we should remember that our religion is something which is very profound, yet we have narrowed it through our own ignorance. And if we understand the profundity of our religion, then it will make it easier for us to have the various skills and faculties needed to be a well-rounded person and to deal with the many stresses that we face within our society. Just to give one example, people sometimes say that immigrants who come to America, they don't come for their religion, they come for money. But who said money is not religion? This is a common judgment. Sometimes children make it against their parents. Sometimes people, they say that even about themselves, I didn't come for God. I came for career. I came for a secular education. I'm not saying it's a good decision. There are many people who immigrate to a society or go to a different country or a different city or a different place or a different job, and they lose their faith. So I'm not saying it's a good decision or a bad decision, There are people who make decisions for religion that are not the right decision. Right now, if I decide that I'm going to move my entire family without consulting them to, say, a Muslim country, and I'm going to ask them to learn an entirely different language and culture and go to an entirely different school system and say goodbye to their family and to their friends that are here in this country, I might make that decision for the sake of religion, because I think that they will have a more Islamic environment, or they will learn Arabic, or they will learn Quran. It's a decision made for religion, but it may not be the best decision, or it might. There are people who say that I'm going to take my child out of public school and put them in an Islamic school. And I've seen examples of people who have been corrupted in an Islamic school because everybody else whose parents put them in that Islamic school were also problem kids. And so they found a negative environment within the Islamic school. Or because the parents said that now I've done my duty, I've put them in an Islamic environment, I don't need to be as worried and as concerned. The school will take care of them. And so they are less on guard. My point is not that you shouldn't do that. My point is that when a decision is made for Islam, that doesn't automatically mean that it is right. There's the saying in English that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That is true. The road to hell is paved with religious intentions. You have to make a decision for God, and you also have to examine and make sure that that is actually what God wants. And that was, in fact, the struggle of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ against their opponents and their enemies and people who were ignorant of Ahlul Bayt, especially the Khawarij. They did everything for God, and they did exactly what God did not want them to do. And that is a challenge that Ahlul Bayt ﷺ, they faced throughout their struggles to guide and to teach the ummah. My point is not to say what is a good decision or a bad decision, where to move, what career to take. My point is simply to say that to live a good life is not inherently an irreligious decision. If it were an irreligious decision, then there would be fault in the Quran. Because the Quran teaches me to pray, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And so if God is teaching me to pray for it, then why would God not teach me to work for it? So if getting a secular education, or getting a high-paying career, or moving to a place where the society and the legal system allows me to be able to work and earn, if that were bad, then it shouldn't be something that I pray for. Allah doesn't want us to become hypocrites. And He doesn't teach us to become hypocrites by asking us pray for one thing in the world, but don't work for it with your own efforts. So we have narrowed religion to say, if you move to a place where everyone is praying and fasting, then that is for the sake of God. But if you move to a place where you are able to earn and you are able to acquire wealth and assets, then that is not for the sake of God, that is for the sake of dunya. Dunya can be for God, and dunya can be for shaitan. It depends on the intention. Inherently, it is not evil. And if you use it for the sake of Allah, then it is better to have it than not to have it. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us, not just Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana, but in all of the du'as that we have from Ahlul Bayt, oh Allah, grant us wus'ah and abundance in our rizq. So if money were bad, then why would Ahlul Bayt ask us to pray to Allah not just for abundant rizq, but for easy rizq? Look at the du'as. Look in particular of the du'a that you recite after Salatul Isha. Salatul Isha is the prayer just before people go to bed. Those are the final thoughts that you pray before you go to bed. The du'a of Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib, those prayers are about your spiritual development. But the prayer that we have been taught for Isha focuses on rizq. That's not that I, as a human being, I'm concerned about this world. And I say that God's intention is to take me away and not have me concerned about this world. Allah Himself is telling me that this last prayer you pray after the final faridah before you go to bed, make it a prayer for rizq. Abundant rizq, easy rizq, but rizq for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you earn it through halal means and you use it seeking the pleasure of Allah and not just to serve your own desires. So the first way that we can reduce the stress that our Muslims have in their life is to recognize that in Islam and in the Quran there is never a conflict between deen and dunya. There is never a tension between deen and dunya. In fact, the purpose of deen is to give us a way to live in dunya for akhirah. One way to understand deen is that deen is the connection that turns dunya into akhirah. A person came to our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, and says to the Imam that, can you help me? I have love of dunya in my life and I can't seem to get rid of it. I like good things. And the Imam said, right, what do you want to do? What is it that you want this wealth and rizq and dunya for? And the person says, well, I want to be able to give sadaqah. I want to be able to go for Hajj and Umrah. I want to be able to get things and meet the needs and the wants of my family and my parents and my fellow believers. This is what I want this world for. And the Imam says, you haven't mentioned anything of dunya. What you want is akhirah. This is exactly what akhirah is. There is no conflict and no tension. We often think deen versus dunya. Deen is not versus dunya. Deen is for dunya, to convert your life in dunya to akhirah. The money you want and the wealth that you have can either be dunya or it can be akhirah. What will determine whether it is dunya or akhirah is not what it is, but what your deen is and who you are serving with what you have. And so living in this world can be a material life or it can be a spiritual life. That is what deen is for. It is the link between dunya and akhirah. It is what converts this world to the hereafter. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So my child is a religious person, not if they always have a tasbih in hand, but if they are able to live in this world with a godly intention and with good akhlaq. We have caricatured and narrowed the meaning of religion, and that places stress on us because we see that we are pulled in so many different directions. You need to relax and you need entertainment in life. You need a social life. You need intellectual stimulation. You need physical activity. None of those things are a compartment separate from your deen, but all of them are part of your deen. Do it for the sake of Allah. Do it in a way that is pleasing to Allah. But meet those needs of your body, of your emotions, of your soul, of your mind, and all of the faculties that God has given you. If you ignore the need, then you are compromising your deen. Just like if I have the perfect prayer and I never miss a prayer, but when the time for Ramadan comes, I say, and I don't want to fast. Not I can't fast. That's not for me. We all know that person is not religious. If I go for Hajj every year, but I don't pray, or if I pray, I say I'll do all 4 prayers perfectly, but Fajr is not for me. None of us would be even slightly inclined to say that person is religious. We would immediately be able to call it out and say that's not Islam. But why is it that when a person ignores the other call that Allah has, we can say the person is religious, but they have bad akhlaq? How can you be religious and have bad akhlaq? If our Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa was told, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, you have the best character, and he is the role model and the uswa that we are to follow. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. He is our role model. So what is religion other than the character and the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa sallam? But then, if somebody doesn't pray, I will immediately say they're not religious. If somebody prays and doesn't have akhlaq, I will say they are so religious and they have bad akhlaq. Then what part of my religion is from Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam? And what part of my religion is from the Quran? Don't narrow religion. Keep it broad so that it meets, as it was intended to meet, the needs of all of the faculties that Allah has placed within us. And that, in the time that is secular, will help people keep their presence of mind, even if they have stress and peer pressure and so many other difficulties. So this is one and perhaps the most important part of how we can address the crisis that even people of faith have in terms of their spiritual and emotional well-being. Because we have narrowed religion, then our relationship to our religion is always a feeling of inadequacy. I feel like I have failed God. I feel like I have failed my parents. I feel like I have failed my community. I feel like it's not for me. I'm not cut out for it. And then I get cut off. And this is because that religion is not the religion of Allah. And it is not the religion of the Prophet. And it is not the religion of Ahlul Bayt. It is something that we have made up, which is turning us against our own best interest. That our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa his religion was something else entirely. Today, we are at the end of the month of Safar. We remember the death of our Prophet. Let us remember that when he entered Medina, a city that was called Yathrib became known as Madinatun Nabi. Now this was the city of Muhammad. When he entered Medina, he told us the nature of his religion. The first sermon that is recorded that the Prophet gave in Medina, he said that, O people, Afshus Salam, spread a message of peace. Where Muslims are found, that place should be a place filled with the message and the presence of harmony and peace. وَأَطْعِمُ الطَّعَامِ, a place where Muslims are found should not have anybody that goes hungry. In our politics and in our lives, we should be concerned with food security and making sure that people have their basic needs met. وَصِلُوا الْأَرْحَامِ, and connect yourselves to your families. The Prophet is giving this sermon in Medina. The number of Muslims in Medina, the Muhajirin, had not all come. Some had started to come, but many were still in Mecca. And in Medina, it was only 1 or 2 people in each family that had become Muslim. The majority of the people of Medina were not yet Muslim at the very beginning. They were still being introduced and deciding, and some of them were on the fence. And some families had few people who had become Muslim. The Prophet says, وَصِلُوا الْأَرْحَامِ, connect yourself to your families. Don't separate yourself and make yourself into a cult, but keep yourself connected. The families that the Prophet was speaking to were mostly kafir. But the same message that he had given to people in Mecca, he gave for the people in Medina. Your parents may punish you for being Muslim, but you don't punish them because you have become Muslim. You honor them and show them that this religion has come to enlighten and not to imprison. It has come to connect and not to isolate. And then the Prophet says, وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ. Pray at night when people are sleeping and not concerned about God, then you keep alive the concern and the memory of Allah. The first sermon the Prophet gave, this was the akhlaq and the teaching of the Prophet that made the city Madinatul Nabi, the city of the Prophet. But the tragedy is that Madinatul Nabi did not have space for the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet on his death. In Mecca, the Prophet was cornered. And the Prophet lost any protection after the death of Abu Talib and Lady Khadija. And the Prophet was forced to flee Mecca to Medina, where he was given refuge. But Medina turned into a place as tragic as Mecca for Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet. When the Prophet was lying on the ground, just having died, can you imagine that nobody came to Lady Fatima and said, "O daughter of the Prophet, my condolences, it is your father who has left this world"? Can we imagine that Ahlul Bayt were alone? And those who came, they came to threaten. Those who came, they came to enforce a new ungodly government. They didn't come to support and to offer condolences, such that the daughter of the Prophet said in the days and weeks after the death of Rasulullah that so many calamities have come upon me that if the day suffered those calamities, it would have become night. صُبَّتْ عَلَيَّ مَصَائِبُ لَوْ أَنَّهَا صُبَّتْ عَلَى الْأَيَّامِ صِرْنَ لَيَالِيَا. This was the suffering of Ahlul Bayt at the death of our Prophet. In his final moments, the Prophet called Ahlul Bayt towards him, and they gathered. At that time, Amirul Mu'mineen and Lady Fatima, they brought their young children. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein were 7 and 6 years old. Lady Zainab and Kulthum were 5 and 4 years old. Although they were young, they could understand the gravity of the loss that they were facing. The politics had already begun. The companions of the Prophet had already said, Na'udhu billah, that the Prophet speaks without knowing what he is saying. Ignore his command. This happened during the lifetime of the Prophet when he asked for pen and paper and he was prevented. So the solitude, the isolation, the tragedy of Ahlul Bayt had already begun. The Prophet gathered his family around them and then he gave them words of guidance. He said something to Lady Fatima that made her cry. And then he called her towards him again. And he said something that made her smile. Later, when she was asked, she said that my father told me that before long he would leave this world. I could not help but cry. Then the Prophet, seeing my tears, could not bear my sadness. He said, Fatima, come close to me once again. Let me tell you that you will be the first of my family to be reunited with me. The Prophet could not bear to see the tears of Lady Fatima, even for a moment. Imagine what he saw when he told Ahlul Bayt what would happen after him, when he prepared Amir al-Mu'mineen for the years of oppression that he would suffer, when he told Imam Hassan that on your funeral your enemies will throw arrows at your casket. But oh Hussein, what can I say? That there will be arrows that will come towards your body as well. And yet it will not be your body, but it will be while you are alive that enemies will come and they will throw arrows and cast spears and throw stones while you are yet alive, and they will martyr you all alone in the land of Karbala. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسین.
یا حسین 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 یا حسین
یا حسن 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 صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا 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 یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، لاشا بھی مجتبیٰ کا، لاشا بھی مجتبیٰ کا یا رب لہو میں تر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، لاشا بھی مجتبیٰ کا، لاشا بھی مجتبیٰ کا یا رب لہو میں تر ہے، صیت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر 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 ہے، بعد نبی نہ میں نے دنیا میں چین پایا، مرنے کے بعد مجھ کو تربت پہ بھی رلا، یا شوہر کو تیغ ماری بیٹے کو سنپلایا. بابا ہمارے گھر پہ، بابا ہمارے گھر پہ امت کی کیوں نظر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. یہ آخری سفر ہے. شبیر کربلا میں جب دین کو بچانا، اکبر کی طرح فدیہ قاسم کو بھی بنا. ناممکن نہیں ہے میرا کرب و بلا میں آنا. نصرت کو تیری بھائی، نصرت کو تیری بھائی، حاضر میرا پسر ہے. سبت نبی کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. سبت نبی کا یہ آخری سفر ہے. آل نبی کی عظمت دل سے مٹا رہے ہیں. قرآن پر یہ قاری فتوے لگا رہے ہیں. مظلوم تیرے غم کو بدعت بتا رہے ہیں. ان کی خطا نہیں ہے، ان کی خطا نہیں ہے، یہ خون کا اثر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. اولاد مصطفیٰ پہ غم کی گھٹائیں چھائیں، خوشیاں نصیب میں نہ آل نبی کے آئیں. قبریں جدا جدا ہیں سادات کی بنائی. امت تیرے ستم سے، امت تیرے ستم سے بکھرا ہوا یہ گھر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر 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 ہے. آل نبی کی عظمت دل سے مٹا رہے ہیں. قرآن پر یہ قاری فتوے لگا رہے ہیں. مظلوم تیرے غم کو بدعت بتا رہے ہیں. ان کی خطا نہیں ہے، ان کی خطا نہیں ہے، یہ خون کا اثر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. سبت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. یہ نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے. بعد نبی نہ میں نے دنیا میں چین پایا. مرنے کے بعد مجھ کو تربت میں بھی رلا. یا شوہر کو تیغ ماری، بیٹے کو سنپلایا. بابا ہمارے گھر پہ بابا ہمارے گھر پہ امت کی کیوں نظر ہے، سیرت نبی کا کیسا یہ آخری سفر ہے، سیرت نبی کا کیسا.
زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری پاک جگیرانو ہائے ویرا، 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 کول جے ہو دیتے رو رو کڈ دی، کول جے ہو دیتے رو رو کڈ دی، میں تیری لاش جو تیرانو ہائے ویرا، زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری پاک جگیرانو ہائے ویرا، زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری پاک جگیرانو ہائے ویرا، زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری پاک جگیرانو ہائے ویرا، کول جے ہو دیتے رو رو کٹ دے، کول جے ہو دیتے رو رو کٹ دے، میں تیری لاش جو تیرانو ہائے ویرا، زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری پاک جگیرانو 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 ہائے ویرا، پھر بھی میرے 18 کھڑی محتاج داتوں، پھر بھی میرے 18 کھڑی محتاج داتوں، کدے پتھر نہیں وجدے ویکھے، کدی پتھر نہیں وجدے ویکھے، پردیدار اسیرانو ہائے ویرا، زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری پاک جگیرانو 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 ہائے ویرا، آج با کر بھی ہے کم سن
میں بھی پابند رسن ہاں آج باکر بھی ہے کم سن میں بھی پابند رسن ہاں تیرا سجاد ہے لاچار ورن تیرا سجاد ہے لاچار ورن کیویں سامے گا زنجیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران ویروی میرے 18 کھڑے محتاج ردا تو ویروی میرے 18 کھڑے محتاج ردا تو کدے پتھر نیو وجدے ویکھے کدی پتھر نیو وجدے ویکھے پردے دار اسیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران کول جے ہون دیتے رو رو کڑ دے کول جے ہو دیتے رو رو کڑ دے میں تیری لاش جو تیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران وارثا والی بے وارث کوئی پردیس سچ جا کے وارثا والی بے وارث کوئی پردیس سچ جا کے اللہ جانے کیویں زینب ٹر پئی اللہ جانے کیویں زینب ٹر پئی بے کفن چھوڑ کے ویرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ تیری آپاک جگیرانو ہائے ویران آج باکر بھی ہے کم سن میں بھی پابند رسن ہاں آج باکر بھی ہے کم سن میں بھی پابند رسن ہاں تیرا سجاد ہے لاچار ورن تیرا سجاد ہے لاچار ورن کیویں سامے گا زنجیرانو ہائے ویران زینب چھوڑ چلی تیری آپاک جگیرانو
یا حسن 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 محمد علی محمد صلوات
آل محمد بتوجہ زیارت السلام علیکم یا سیدنا مولانا یا رسول اللہ السلام علیکم والا جدک عبد المطلب والا امیک ابی طالب والا ابیک عبداللہ والا امیک آمنہ بنت وہب والا ابنائک طاہر وقاسم و ابراہیم. السلام علیکم اہل بیت نبوہ ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. السلام علیکم مولانا امیر المؤمنین. السلام علیکم مولاتی فاطمۃ الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین. السلام علیکم مولاتی خدیجۃ الکبریٰ ام المؤمنین. السلام علیکم مولانا ابا محمد حسن ابن علی المجتبیٰ. السلام علیکم مولانا ابا عبداللہ الحسین. السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی ابن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلی اصحاب الحسین واختک زینب ام کلثوم وبنتک سکینہ واخیک العباس جمیعا ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. السلام علیکم مولانا علی ابن الحسین زین العابدین ومحمد ابن علی الباقر وجعفر ابن محمد الصادق وموسى ابن جعفر القاسم وعلی ابن موسى رضا واختک معصومہ ومحمد ابن علی الجواد وعلی ابن محمد الحادی والحسن ابن علی العسکری. السلام علیک یا قائم آل محمد یا حجت ابن الحسن یا صاحب العصر والزمان. الامان 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 من فتنة الزمان الجل یا مولا. السلام علیک یا شریک القرآن. السلام علیک یا کعبۃ الایمان. السلام علیک یا امامنا و امام الانس والجان. عجل اللہ تعالی فرجک وسهل اللہ تعالی مخرجک وارزقنا فی الدنیا زیارتک وفی الآخرت شفاعتک وجعلنا من اوانک وانصارک ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. دعا امام زمانہ.
اللہم کل ولیک الحجت بن حسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ فی ہذہ الساعہ وفی کل ساعہ ولیا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودلیلا وعیلا حتی تسکنہ ارضک طوعا وتمتعہ فیہا طویلا برحمتک یا ارحم الراحمین.
بسم اللہ پہلے پڑھتے ہیں. اچھا دعا سے پہلے ہاں بسم اللہ نہیں چھوڑنی.